As the people get your number, it won't be long before they storm this chamber and they hang you, and they'll be right.
Disgraceful! Disgraceful!
What we've actually had here is criminal activity by bankers, and not a single banker has been sent to prison. He is an undemocratic fascist. You are the biggest tax avoiders in Europe.
Why is it that you are incapable of debating what everybody wants debated? Where does our money go?
Isn't this all about political control?
I'd like to talk to you today about something I've been writing about now for some time. Most recent articles have been in Going Postal, but it goes back further than that. And it's something which is fundamentally unusual and un-British. I want to talk to you about the politicisation of our police force. Now, this would seem inconceivable to Englishmen of a generation ago, my generation if you will, I'm old now, that this could possibly happen. It was something that only happened on the continent. It happened with the Gestapo, Mussolini's secret police, Franco's secret police, Stalin's secret police. And all these police forces, secret police forces, which are significantly unpleasant and devoted to a political ideal. And that was always something completely alien to the British way. The whole concept of a British policeman is that he is a citizen, he's a policeman drawn from his own society, but is given the powers of arrest in that community. And that's how it's always been seen, and that's how it's always been received. And of course, the police in England have always policed the community with consent, by consent of that community. And that's worked very well indeed for many years. And when back in my army days, I used to train with the police in aid of the civil power. The army and the police had a relationship where they trained together to get together for disasters, so on and so forth. That kind of thing. And the chief constables that I met, and I met many and shared many a drink with them in the officers' mess, their senior police officers had traditional background, traditional education. When I say traditional education, I mean they weren't indoctrinated in any way at universities. They thought for themselves, and they understood particularly the role of the police force. That's something that's drifted away, and it's drifted away from a number of reasons. There's a number of reasons that's happened. First of all, police promotion has been fiddled around with. So now the Home Office, for some decades now, have tried to run a quota system. So the policeman doesn't get promoted to be the Assistant Chief Constable because he's a good cop. He gets promoted because he's the right background. Politically, he's liberal, if you will use that phrase, incorrectly in many cases. He's one of a minority. He's either a minority gender or ethnic minority, or of a certain sexual persuasion, and all these kind of things go together to make sure that he's filling up a quota which has been set by the Home Office. And one old retiring policeman friend of mine said to me, when he was a relatively senior officer, the first thing somebody from the Home Office Inspectorate would ask was, how many ethnic minorities has they recruited? Not how many bad guys had they nicked. And this really has showed the way now since possibly the time of Blair, even perhaps, I don't know, before Blair. So the politicisation of the police force is a very unhealthy thing, and I've been warning against it for some time. Now it's manifesting itself rather unpleasantly now, and we can see it unfolding, because during this lockdown period we've seen a lot of clips on social media of police behaving in the most extraordinary manner. For example, they can stand by idly while certain political groups, ironically dedicated to their disbandment and defunding, daub graffiti all over the statues of our great leaders, Winston Churchill being the case in point in Whitehall just a month or so ago. They stand by and do absolutely nothing. When the eco-fascists take over central London and close all the bridges, they stand by and they do nothing. They're more likely to arrest somebody who's walking their dog in perhaps some perceived breach of lockdown than they are to actually arrest people who are causing criminal damage. And we've seen far too many examples of that in recent months. We saw them stand by in Cambridge University. They stood by as eco-fascists dug up the lawn of Trinity College, and they said it was nothing to do with them. But when Tommy Robinson, and I hold no brief for Tommy Robinson one way or the other, but when Tommy Robinson was having a drink in a Cambridge pub, he was very soon arrested and run out of town for no apparent legal reason by the Cambridge police. A very significant act, political act by the police. They belong to secret societies. Common Purpose is one of them, or semi-secret societies. These people band together behind closed doors. They don't necessarily have our interests at heart. So I would like to see the police enforcing the law on a completely non-subjective basis. You're either breaking the law or you're not. I'm very worried about the increased powers that we're giving to the police force now. They become corrupted. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as of course we all know from that famous quotation. We can't afford to give the police total powers in this way. They will abuse it. It's not their fault, they're not necessarily bad people, but they will abuse it because people abuse power, and we've seen that in police forces across the world historically. So that's something that's worrying. So no more extended powers for the police. We also see that the standard of education, and I'm not talking about university education, is rather poor in the police, many police. The good guys are leaving. The old-fashioned good guy policemen are now leaving in big numbers. And we've got people really who aren't very bright. And I think, remember the social clip from that sergeant, police sergeant, I think it was in Finsbury or North London somewhere, trying to send a journalist home because he was killing people. When he said, "Can I take a photograph? What are you doing?" "I'm a journalist." And he said, "Go home, you're killing people." The guy obviously was a complete cretin, but he had 3 stripes on his arm. He'd somehow got to be a sergeant. And I'd like to know how that happened. What is the recruitment procedure for some of these people? What is the promotional procedure for some of these people? And of course it was politicised when we had the whole idea of having a police commissioner, was to ironically depoliticise it. But of course that turned into a race between the Conservative and the Labour Party. So you either had a Conservative or a Labour Party member who was a Commissioner of Police. That was not the point at all. It was supposed to be an individual who had the good of the whole community at heart. That hasn't happened. So it's reinforced even more Chief Constables with a political background. And you've seen some of them on the television and you must scratch your head wondering how the hell they got the job of being a Chief Constable or Assistant Chief Constable. Absolutely dire. Some of them are just, one might argue that some of them are just morons when you see them interviewed. So let's get back to old-fashioned policing. I've got a lot of friends who are in the police force, retired now, most of them, but not all. And some I count as good friends who were retired assistant chief constables. Good people, but they've gone now. We don't seem to have many of those left. There are 1 or 2, but in the main not. So think about that very carefully, because we need to get back to a police force which is of the community, for the community, and not there because there's some sort of quota arrangement. They're there because they're good cops and they got promoted on merit, not because they support a particular political point of view. No good will come of this, and I see it getting worse.